Is there anyone online for the Rules Committee meeting? Okay. We'll call this meeting to order. First of all, I'd just like for everyone just to take a moment and think about Ms. June. You lost your Rules Chair Committee chair, and he is greatly missed by me. He served as my mentor, so I know we all miss him, and as everyone said, he's getting a lot of accolades around the state. And if anyone, if you don't know, that Bainbridge High School has set up a memorial scholarship in his name. There's a lot of information out and about. If you need information, I can get the information to you. But Bainbridge High School has set up a memorial scholarship fund.
Well, also in the South Georgia, the recruitment. Help me out here, Richard.
Yeah, the rural innovation.
Rural innovation.
Scott Johnson
Rural
is now joining.
His name
office is named after.
Yeah.
in honor.
Yeah.
So
So a lot of honors coming in, a lot of deserved honors. He was did a lot in his lifetime, accomplished a lot in his lifetime. But I miss him greatly. And at this time, I will turn it over to Miss Dr. Tiffany Taylor to get our meeting started here.
Thank you. So the first item on our agenda for Rules Committee is a request to adopt the amendment to State Board of Education Rule 160-4-2-.12 Comprehensive Health and Physical Education Program Plan. So this rule is being amended to include the requirements of House Bill 287, which are to provide for annual age-appropriate vapor and tobacco product awareness and prevention education in grades K through 12, and human trafficking awareness and prevention education in grades 6 through 12. This rule was approved by the State Board for initiation at the Board's September 2021 meeting and has been posted for 30 days public review and comments.
Okay. In the panel, any comments, questions, concerns you may have?
Were there any comments received?
They were not, I think it was strictly procedural. We had already taken care of a lot of this in the health standards that were recently passed, so this is just cleanup.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So if everyone approves, we'll plan to move this to the consent agenda.
This one has to go on.
That's right, that's,
pull for a
so
separate
this
vote.
goes, yes, sorry about that, you're right. Separate vote. All right, number 2.
Item number 2 is a request to amend State Board of Education Rule 160-5-1-.15, awarding units of credits and acceptance of transfer credits and/or grades. So House Bill 606 from the 2021 legislative session amended the official Code of Georgia annotated section 20-3-519-6A to add the Georgia Independent Schools Association to the list of accrediting agencies that can provide accreditation for eligible high schools for the purpose of the Hope Scholarships and Grants. This particular rule utilizes this list of accrediting agencies in its definition of accredited schools. And the current version of this rule lists by name the accrediting agencies from that section of the law. So the rule amendment here updates the definition of accredited school to include all accrediting agencies identified in Code Section 20-3-519-6A and 6B. This rule was approved by the board for initiation at the September meeting and has been posted for 30 days, public review and comment.
Did we receive any comments?
No.
how many? I might have asked this before, but how many of the schools in the Independent School Association? How many do we have now?
How many independent school associations?
That that we're giving a accreditation to these Georgia Independent School Associations.
Right, so we aren't giving the accreditation. Were already accredited and were added to the list by the General Assembly. And so we're just
Scott,
updating our language in our rule to reflect what was added in law.
Okay, but I know that, what's his name from Albany that was on our board, was on the Independent Accreditation Committee. So, all right, that's fine.
Sure.
I'm good.
okay, any other comments, questions? And I left my notebook in my car, so you have to help me here, Miss Tiffany.
That one's also pulled for a separate
That's
vote.
okay. Doesn't do me very good, much good to have a meeting with you beforehand if I leave my notes in the car.
You're doing fine.
All right, number 3.
Item number 3 is request to approve or adopt the information technology pathway course revisions. So business and industry experts reviewed the courses in the information technology pathway and provided input on the revisions necessary to bring the courses up to date and help them remain relevant for the next few years. The courses proposed for revision include advanced cybersecurity, digital design, embedding computing, game design, animation and simulation, information technology essentials, IT support, intro to cybersecurity, intro to hardware technology, network fundamentals, networking systems and support, programming, games, apps, and society, web design, and web development. And these courses have been posted for 30 days public review and comment.
Did we get anything on them? Any of them?
Yes, we had 152 respond to the 30-day posting period. And out of the 10 questions that were asked for them to review the criteria, when you combine the agree or strongly agree, 84 to 100% all responded favorably to those 10 questions. And then one of the items was more than 91% agree or strongly agree that the standards show evidence of academic rigor. And the course writing team has provided courses that are rigorous and will give students a broad yet detailed look at the computer science opportunities available to them. And several of the respondents asked that we revisit in the pathway assessments, the EOPA options to better align the EOPAs with the new standards. And that's the next item in the process. We'll be looking at different tests that might be appropriate for these pathways. And we did have an industry partner that has challenged the DOE to update the standards every 2 to 3 years because things rapidly change.
They changed that fast.
So, I don't know, we may have to have a crowd that just does standards. But that was it.
Okay. Anybody on the committee have any questions, comments?
This can go on consent.
All right, number 4.
Item number 4 is a request to post the Georgia Standards of Excellence for Personal Finance and Economics for public review and comment. At the August 2021 State Board meeting, Superintendent Woods recommended an amendment to State Board of Education Rule 160-4-2.48, high school graduation requirements, to grant students the option of completing either the economics course or personal finance course to fulfill the 1/2 unit of the economics graduation requirement. The State Board proposed the establishment of a review committee to review the economics course standards and work on strengthening the scope and scale of personal finance standards contained therein. An economics review committee was established and included board members, legislators, content area teachers, and business and industry experts in the areas of finance and economics. This review committee, facilitated by the Georgia Council on Economic Education, met and included proposed changes to the current economics course standards that increase personal finance standards within the course without affecting the integrity of the economic standards. If approved, these courses will be posted for 30 days, public review and comment.
Questions, comments?
Well, Matt and I sat on this
Right.
committee, and so, I think it might be nice, we can move it for posting, but it might be nice for, I'm gonna post for 30 days, but to have the whole board here, everybody got a copy of them, I think, but have some conversation about it, because there's some that did not, have a chance to really look at it, and I think it was pretty significant.
Yeah, and I read it, and I'm glad that the meeting was functional and productive. And
Well,
that,
Yeah, there was a lot of preliminary
Yeah.
done, and then, of course, with the collaborative group that we had there, majority of teachers and people that had already worked with it, when they signed off on it so well and understood
Right.
how we move things and fit things in to give it more financial stability,
and give the finance portion
Oh, yeah,
an
it's about
important role in
50%.
it instead of filler at the end.
Right.
I think is what
in the,
a lot of them felt like. Yeah.
But I think it would be great for the other members to see it and hear it.
Okay.
And I'm sure Matt,
Are you looking
Is it budget?
tomorrow or
Yeah.
next month?
No, well, I think tomorrow.
Yeah,
Tomorrow,
we
yeah.
have discussion on it tomorrow.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Move that to the consent agenda then. Approval. Item number 5.
Item number 5 is a request to amend a request for a new State Board of Education Rule 160-5-3-.17, use of alternative vehicles for the transport of specified student groups. This rule is being requested for initiation, which means if approved, it will be posted for 30 days public review and comment. Senate Bill 159 from the 2021 legislative session expanded the definition of vehicles that can be used to transport students under certain conditions. Students who either have transportation needs documented in their Individualized Education Program, or IEP, or may currently lack or during the previous academic year lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, as described under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, can be transported to and from school and school-related activities using a vehicle designed by the manufacturer to transport a maximum of 8 students and not less than 5 students. This new rule establishes the minimum standards and requirements, which are delineated separately from requirements of school buses for the maintenance, repair, inspection, and use of such vehicles, minimum qualifications of the drivers of such vehicles, and other requirements deemed necessary. If approved for initiation, this proposed new rule will be posted for 30 days public review and comment.
Okay, any comments, questions? Ella, did you raise your hand or you were just turning your page
I
there?
was just turning my page.
Okay.
I think we've talked about this before.
We have.
several times.
Dr. Taylor, this consent?
Yes.
All right, item number 6.
Item number 6 is a request to amend State Board of Education Rule 160-5-3-.02, Contracted Transportation Services. This rule is being requested for initiation, which means if approved, it will be posted for 30 days public review and comment. I gave you the content from the previous rule. It's aligned a little bit to the previous rule related to Senate Bill 159 from the previous session. But this particular rule amendment updates information in the current rule and grants LEAs, local educational agencies, the opportunity to utilize services of contracted transportation carriers who may use alternative vehicles for the transport of specified student groups. The rule includes language to prohibit the use of transportation provided by a rideshare network service or transportation referral service, as such terms are defined in Code Section 40-1-190. If approved for initiation, this proposed rule amendment will be posted for 30 days public review and comment.
Comments or questions from anyone? Not, we'll move this to the consent agenda. Item number 8.
This rule, we're requesting to repeal State Board of Education Rule 160-4-8-.05 Guidance Counselors. This rule repeal is being requested for initiation, which also means if approved, will be posted for 30 days public review and comment. Rule 160-4-8-.05 Guidance Counselors was adopted in August of 2000. We're requesting a repeal of this rule in order to replace it with a new rule that incorporates current school counseling practices and protocols.
All right, any comments, questions?
This will remain under CTAE, right? The counselors?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm like thinning today. I left my notes that I made about it, but we're broadening it to give more responsibility to school counselors.
Is to reflect what the sort of current role of school
Define, yeah,
counselors.
Define it,
Yes.
okay. Huh?
Redefine.
Redefine it, okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move that to the consent agenda. Number 8.
All right, item number 8, school counseling, is request to initiate new State Board of Education Rule 160-4-8.05 school counseling. So this rule is being requested for initiation. Again, if approved, will be posted for 30 days public review and comment. We're requesting to replace the current Rule 160-4-8.05 guidance counselors, which we requested in the previous item to be repealed, and replace it with this rule for school counseling. This, as we stated, the previous rule was adopted in August 2000. Over the past 2 decades, the school counseling program and the role of school counselors have shifted to provide more comprehensive supports to students and align with our mission and vision of ensuring a well-balanced education with expanded opportunities for students and graduating students who are ready to learn, ready to live, and ready to lead and work. This rule is being created to reflect the current components of a comprehensive school counseling program and the current roles and duties of school counselors.
All right. Any comments, questions? I guess if we had it, would probably been with the other one. They're just kind of hand in hand here. All right. We'll move on to number 9 then.
Item number 9 is request for approval to post standards for heavy equipment operations for public review and comment. Through completion of the locally developed career pathway course process, Toombs County School System, along with multiple local and regional businesses, industry partners, and post-secondary institutions, collaborated to create a secondary career pathway designed to help students transition smoothly into an in-demand heavy equipment operations career. This career pathway is designed to give all students the opportunity to complete the 3 sequence pathway courses in heavy equipment operations. Through several meetings, industry guided the work of specific skill sets and technical concepts students needed to complete during these courses. In addition to many local construction industry partners, Southeastern Technical College, the Construction Education Foundation of Georgia, and Toombs County Schools were involved in the determination and identification of curriculum standard content for these courses. If approved, these courses will be posted for 30 days public review and comment.
Comments, questions? Any of the board members? I'm excited to see this.
Me too.
All right, no questions, so, yes, ma'am.
It's just overall, and I should know this, but when we send these things out for the 30-day posting, what kind of promotion is done to let people know that they're there?
Well, again, it goes out to the schools, districts. Of course, it's posted on our website. Any listserv, I think, that we have, we can send it out through there as well.
If it's something important to a lot of people.
Yeah, because it's you know, you think about what's going on in the world with education right now, and I think at the core of a lot of the problems are that parents don't feel communicated with. And I think we do a good job. I think that's why we've seen very little of the problems here that we've seen in other places. But it seems like there are issues here that people would want to know about it. I don't know if we do social media about it or anything like that, where maybe we let people know, hey, we're going to be posting this for a 30-day comment period. I don't know.
But our RESA, our Board of Controls, we let them know and say, hey, will you get this?
Yeah, they on, and Ms. Frick does a great job
Yeah.
getting it out on
Great.
all of our.
But
Good.
But it is true, if it's not
Yeah.
anything that's really got any hype going on with it.
Well, I mean,
Sometimes we get 28 responses or.
it's true, and
Yeah.
most people don't get upset about things until it's
Right.
already been enacted.
Exactly.
So it's just the way it is.
Well, again, it's, you know, we're limited to by who pays attention and comes
Right,
up.
I understand.
You know, I mean, as far as us, I mean, I'd love to see that we would have a lot more followers on Facebook and things of that nature. You know, and to be honest, it just depends on what that topic is. Does it get a lot of attention? Here, this is somewhat specific to Toombs County, I think, and so I'm hoping, you know, it is something that they help promote. But to the individuals, you know, maybe it's something we need to have a discussion with our local boards of education, that if we send anything out, if you have something, please send it out as well. So we're,
Send that to your local
again,
media.
as far as, because they probably could reach their parents a
Yes.
little bit easier,
Yes,
so.
push it down,
push Yeah.
information. Because we are very transparent in what we do. We put it out there, we discuss things over months, if not years sometimes, you know, and we're transparent about what we do. We have processes in place where the public can be involved. all of that, but it's kind of like a tree falling in a forest. If people don't know we do all those things, then, you know,
Yeah.
it's hard to get the impact we want.
And that may be something we could look at. I know hopefully we're expanding our communication team.
Yay.
So that may be something we look at, because that's probably
Sounds good.
one of the more difficult things is reaching parents and people in the community, just because of who we deal with. And we have to rely on them as basically word of mouth and just voluntarily getting associated with what we do. So.
And if it doesn't hit their
Thank you.
sweet spot or soft spot, you know, that most of them will just
Right.
choose it. But like, when she sends out her blast or her communications or whatever, I actually get it on 3 different email addresses, so I'm sure so she sends it out on 3 different listservs that I'm on. So, and I know superintendents, when they get it, and they're associate superintendents, assistant superintendents, if it's something specifically going on, you know, standards or whatever, I feel like they push it out the best they can.
Let's see, Megan, PTA, do we reach out to them, their association, or?
I think that they receive our communications. I don't know that we specifically reach out, and that's something that we could discuss and say, like, you know, these are things that parents might specifically be interested in if they were to include it in their newsletters or their social media, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, committee, so let's look this over and see, and before we adjourn this meeting, I have items 1 and 2 that will both be held for a separate vote. Items 3 through 9 move to the consent agenda.
And we'll pull the economics.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
For a,
discussion.
for a presentation.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can get something succinct and to the point, so it just, for those who maybe did not read their, so, everybody in agreement? Scott, you have anything to add?
Sounds good. Nothing. Thank you very much.
Alright. So, may I make a motion to adjourn? Lisa,
Need a second?
second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
Many of our board members are attending this committee meeting virtually that we're here then.
Scott here.
Thank you, Scott. Leonte, are you there?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Kenneth, are you there by chance? All right, well, we'll give it another minute and Dr. Taylor as well, since she's presenting these. We'll get started. We are live right now. Yes, we are.
Look at my cover now.
Just was up good.
Should we take a vote on whether we should get rid of it?
I'm gonna give
I
it
can
to
vote on that one, right?
Is it?
Those of you who are joining us remotely, we're waiting just a minute before we begin.
Are y'all through with budget?
Ma'am?
Have you finished with budget?
Yeah.
It works. Not close.
Tiffany, I think Superintendent Woods went to look for you.
Oh,
so-
I just saw him in the hallway,
Oh,
so
okay.
he should be in just a moment. He got stopped.
All right. Well, we'll call this meeting of the Charter System and District Flexibility Committee to order. We have, as you see, we have 2 items on the agenda. I'll turn this over to Tiffany Taylor. Tiffany?
Yes, the first item on the agenda is a request to amend the charter system contract for Warren County Schools. So Warren County is seeking an amendment to its charter system contract to extend their charter term to June 30th, 2023 in order to align their charter system renewal process with their district accreditation review timeline. This amendment petition was approved by the Warren County Schools Board of Education and meets the requirements of rule and law.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Taylor? Any objection to putting this on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none. Item 2.
Item 2 is a request to amend the strategic waiver school system contract for Gwinnett County Schools. So Gwinnett County seeks to amend their strategic waiver systems contract to add North Metro Academy of Performing Arts and the McClure Health Science High School to its contract. North Metro Academy of Performing Arts was a local charter school that chose to end its charter contract and transition as the first themed elementary school within Gwinnett County under their strategic waiver systems contract. And McClure Health Science High School is their new health science high school that opened in Gwinnett County during the 2020-21 school year. So the Gwinnett County Board of Education approved this amendment on September 23rd, 2021.
Any questions from the committee? Any objection to adding this to the consent agenda? All right. Ms. Taylor, there are a couple of items that we talked about that may be coming up in December. Would you mind sharing that with the committee as well, please?
Absolutely. So at our December meeting, in addition to a couple of charter school petitions, we will also have the State Charter Schools Commission provide their annual report to the state board, which is a requirement in law that they are to do every year. So they're going to come in December and bring that annual report to you. The other thing that we will bring in December is a draft of the Authorized Standards for local and state authorizers. So there will be standards that provide information as to how we govern as the State Board of Education, as the State Charter Schools Commission, and for local district authorizers.
Okay, Matt?
Approximately how many new petitions do we have?
For December,
Yes.
there will be one new petition, but there are potentially a couple of renewals.
How many renewals? Where is the new petition?
It is for a petitioner out of Clayton County.
About how many renewals do you have any idea how many renewals are coming up in this?
We have, I think, how many we bring in December? And then we can talk about how many
It's
for,
always iffy because they have to go through the local
Right.
process first, and there's several in the pipeline. The next one to go through the pipeline is gonna be Drew Charter, which is gonna be at APS's board meeting is until next week, so that may or may not make it. We have Brighton Academy, though, that should be here in
Right.
December.
Okay.
Douglas County, I think that's the only one that will be.
I remember those, okay. Thank you.
But I know some committee members, some of you are here, some of you are joining us remotely, had asked about the possibility that State Charter Schools Commission would attend the meetings, and also the Charter Advisory Committee. And just want you to know that they're always invited, they don't always see fit to attend. But we do want to hear from them in December as the Charter Schools Commission gives its annual report. And then we'll talk about how we're going to manage this pipeline between December and the end, and June 30th. Because there are several renewals and that are going to be coming up this year. Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Taylor or for staff? All right. With that, we have 2 items that will be added to the consent agenda. I'll be glad to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion?
Second.
Second, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.
in the World Series.
I was supposed to watch. I know, that was really awesome.
Well,
Oh, thank you. No, I got it on Amazon. I think it's a knockoff.
I know, but it's still different.
Okay, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and continue here, and then we're gonna hear from Dr. Moore with regard to update on state schools.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to slowly start transitioning with these. I know we have 30 minutes this afternoon of moving away from deaf and hard of hearing services, and it's going to move into early intervention, kind of laying out the course through this school year. And then that will be a nice segue into our vision impairment services, where we'll learn a lot sort of in the springtime about Smoky Powell and the stuff that we do at the Georgia Academy for the Blind and other outreach areas. So it's a nice segue of things that we're doing. And so before I turn it over to our colleagues, and one you already know, she came and presented before, Dr. Tucci, just giving you a quick update as we're continuing to talk about deaf and hard of hearing, is 2 on the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. The first one is we've engaged in a national search firm. And so there are a number of deliverables with it. One of the things that I can tell you, they've been very easy to work with. I've been impressed with them. And they're in agreement of not changing the minimum qualifications. So if you think of leaders in schools in Georgia, we have Tier 2 educational leadership certification from the PSC, but also within that, we're trying to be flexible of looking at provisional status and things to recruit people. So it'll be a good process. One of the phases is they'll have a number of stakeholder groups, which I like. They set all that up. There's a video that they'll create, a heavy emphasis on market. And so at each board meeting, I will keep you updated on that. The other interesting thing at the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf, we're a big film industry here in Georgia. And one of the big producers that come out of these production studios are the Marvel movies. And there's a Marvel movie that's coming out on Friday called The Eternals with Angelina Jolie. And for the first time ever in that cinematic universe, there will be a deaf superhero. And she can do things because she is deaf. And this actress, Lauren, she was nominated for a Tony Award on Broadway. She's just spectacular. And so it'll come out on Friday if you're a sci-fi person, you like that. But she has 2 students that go to ASD. And what's really neat in talking to them is that their reading scores are exceptionally high, as you can imagine. If her mom is an example. So I'll keep you updated about what's happening with that. But just a little plug, we've got someone famous there at ASD, and so that's kind of interesting for us. And so as we move into our next presenters, we have Dr. Stacy Tucci and Kelly Jenkins. And one of the things that I told you before that you would see Dr. Tucci again is about, we call it our deaf law, and she'll walk you through exactly what it is in Georgia Code and how we got here. Some of the people that have been with us for a while, they know how hard it was for us, multiple agencies, to get a law literally created. I've never experienced doing it. We had support from our administration here, as well as other teams like policy and others. And it took a while to do this, but they're going to walk you through what those components are. So this is the part that bridges the gap of deaf and hard of hearing services, and then it's moving literally into early intervention. You'll see the 2 very tethered closely in this part, and then we'll take it from there. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to turn it over.
Before you get started, if you're online right now, if you could mute your microphones, we're picking up a lot of background noise.
Who's online?
You want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, first of all, for you.
And then I think Ms. Kenmore had a question for you.
No, I was just going to say mute.
Okay.
I was pointing out.
Right,
Okay.
I think that was a prevalent feeling among many people here present. So please continue.
Thank you for having us today. It's really wonderful to share some of the work that we've been doing. I am the chair of the Georgia Commission for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. My name is Kelly Jenkins. I am hard of hearing myself. I have an 11-year-old daughter who is hard of hearing, so this is something I've been working on for the past 10 years, not just at the commission level, but also working on some legislation within the state. Besides this piece. So I will just be talking a little bit about the commission's role. Dr. Tucci is going to talk about some of our overall strategy, and we're just going to kind of tag team.
And I just have to say, she's incredible. She's my hero. She has almost single-handedly guided our legislative efforts around the deaf and hard of hearing population. She has been instrumental in passing legislation that provides private insurance coverage for pediatric hearing aids. And she was also instrumental in helping us to pass what became Act 462, and essentially it amended existing code OCGA 30-1-5. If you know about anything that I'm saying, please tell me, and I'll just skip over to the next slide. I know some of you have probably heard this little spiel before, but just to give a couple of updates, the act was signed into law by our former governor, Nathan Deal, in 2018. It was about an 18-month process to develop the content for the bill. We worked with a group of stakeholders statewide. The stakeholders included parents of children who are deaf and hard of hearing. We had staff from local education agencies, as well as the state schools and private schools. We had representatives from the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health. We looked at early intervention service providers from both the public and private sectors, and then we also worked with members of the deaf and hard of hearing community. The goal is really mirroring Nathan Deal's Get Georgia Reading campaign. So we are looking at achieving on-grade level reading and age-appropriate language for all children who are deaf and hard of hearing in the state of Georgia by the 3rd grade. As you know, 3rd grade is that crux year when we switch over from learning how to read to now reading to learn other content area. And our students who are deaf and hard of hearing are not doing all that well when it comes to literacy achievement. And so that was really the impetus for developing this legislation, is really looking at this subpopulation of Georgia students, identifying their unique needs, and then moving the needle on language development and literacy development for our students statewide. Some of the documents that have come out of this legislative work are trying to really operationalize what Georgia's DHH ecosystem looks like, who are those major players, and always trying to keep in mind that our North Star are our children and our families. They are at the center of every decision that we make. Additionally, we have identified 7 key transactions that children and their families move through from birth to literacy. We've identified what these transactions are, what should happen within those transactions, and the age by which those transactions should be completed so that we know children are on a trajectory for age-appropriate language and on-grade level reading. I'm going to switch over to Kelly for just a moment. She is going to talk to you about the commission. This was one of the changes that was enacted by Act 462.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to talk to you a little bit about what the general charge is of the commission. It is to bring legislation to the governor and General Assembly that will support the DHH community. It is also charged with elevating issues within the DHH community and needs that we have that kind of fill some of those gaps that we're identifying within the ecosystem that Dr. Tucci previously spoke about. Currently, the commission is appointed by the governor and the Senate and the House. And these are the individuals on the commission. Some of the changes with 30-1.5, we're really trying to get more representation from the DHH community. And right now we're in the process of filling 6 of these positions. So I'm really excited about that. We have great applicants. All of them are very, very strong. And once we're appointing them, I see a lot of great things coming out of the work that we're doing. You want to talk about the agency? So one of the pieces of legislation was the development of an interagency task force. And Dr. Moore spoke about it just a little bit earlier, this idea that there is a learning trajectory for our students, and it starts at birth. Language development actually starts in utero. And so we need to be looking at what's happening in those early intervention years, making sure that children and families are getting what they need to develop a strong foundation for later academic achievement. And so what we are looking at is getting these major stakeholders together from birth to literacy and having everyone sit down in a room at least 4 times a year, so we're meeting on a quarterly basis, and really talking through what a continuum of care looks like. What do families need from birth to 3? What do families need when they transition from early intervention into early education, preschool services at 3 years of age? What happens in that pre-K time period from 3 to 5? And then what does that transition look like into school-age services at the age of 5? And how do we support these children across the state so that we're providing those services and those resources that they need relative to their unique learner profiles as students who are deaf and hard of hearing? So we have representation from the Georgia Commission. We also have representation from the Georgia Technology Authority, from the Department of Public Health, from the Department of Education, and also from DeKalb. You'll also see that there is a State Board of Education representative. We have been very lucky to work with Scott Johnson in the past couple of years. We would be more than happy to continue to work with Scott if he would like to be our representative on the Interagency Task Force. But we would also, of course, open that up to the board for discussion, and you can decide if Scott would like to continue working with us or if you would like to have a new board representative. We're open to whatever you determine is most appropriate.
You're saying you're not firing Scott.
I am not putting my foot in my mouth this time.
Hey, I'm watching my flank here, just so you know.
Yes, sir.
How do you work with the Georgia Technology Authority?
So that's an excellent question. So we are currently developing, as required by the law, a web-based resource for parents and professionals in the state of Georgia, kind of a one-stop shop of all things deaf and hard of hearing. And so we've actually contracted with the Georgia Technology Authority to develop a georgia.gov website so that we can build out this digital resource for all of our constituents across Georgia. So that's been their major contribution so far, is to be developing this website. Hopefully we will have a version. Hopefully we'll have a version up in February. We'll continue to add content as we have more and more organizations be involved within the development. They're also looking at ensuring that we are following the appropriate federal and state data sharing requirements. So we really want to be able to look at what happened, what services did children receive from birth to 3. But that's housed within the Department of Public Health. When you transition from birth to 3 into DeKalb or DOE, now that data is housed within databases in each of these agencies. And there are different types of numerical identifiers. They don't often flow through all of these different databases. And so making sure that we are in compliance with student privacy legislation, but also that we're doing things as efficiently as possible, that, if all we need to do is put an identifier in, let's say, the Babies Can't Wait website, that then connects to an identifier in the Georgia Pines database. I said website, I should have said database. We can now then do comparative analysis and look at those children's data across these databases with that continuous identifier. But we have to make sure we're doing, we're following legislation. We're ensuring that there's parent consent. Where does that parent consent come from? Where is it housed? One of the things that we've been doing recently is to share data from DPH into a local school system. We had to modify the parent consent at the point of transition. And that new consent form had to go all the way up to OSEP,
Office of Special Education Programs. They had to approve that parent consent form, and then it comes back down, and now it should be in action any day now. So they're keeping us honest. They're making sure no one gets in any trouble, but they're also helping us. I mean, a silver lining of the pandemic is people have become incredibly technology, maybe dependent is not the right word. We've become more capable of using technology. Yes, there you go, technology savvy. And so they are really helping us to leverage what's come out of this pandemic and how can we push out information and resources through this website and through these tech-based manner, if you will. We do have deliverables for the Interagency Task Force. There's an annual report that must be submitted to the Governor's Office and the General Assembly. It's typically due in September of each year. Kelly's going to talk about that with you guys in just a moment. We also were tasked with developing language milestones for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So we're looking at American Sign Language development, spoken English development, and in the birth to 3 years, we're looking at home language. So an example of that might be Spanish. We also, of course, have to develop this web-based resource as well as a print-based resource. We're currently focused on the web-based resource and the work with GTA. We also have to determine language and literacy assessments that are appropriate for students who are deaf and hard of hearing, and we have to support a biannual administration schedule as well as a data collection schedule so that we are able to analyze where our students are succeeding and where they may be facing challenges in terms of their language development and their literacy development. And then as we start to work through some of these initial deliverables, we will arrive at this final deliverable, which is what we refer to as a birth to literacy plan. And this is an individualized plan for every child in the state of Georgia who's deaf and hard of hearing that literally follows them from birth to on-grade level literacy achievement. And so it's sort of like a parent dashboard in a way, if you will, where we're able to take this data, analyze it, and then push out information that parents can actually understand and then act on. So if your child is struggling to develop American Sign Language, and we know that that's foundational for reading, then we can say, hey, we've got an issue here. What can we do to support you? Here's some online ASL classes. They're free of charge. Here's a group that gets together on the weekends and helps support ASL development within your community. So trying to really give parents the information they need to really be an actionable partner in their children's education.
This is probably one of the most exciting parts of the legislation to me personally. I am a parent of a DHH child, and we talk a lot about agencies, what DPH does and what DOE does. As you know, DPH is responsible for these kids 0 to 3, and then DOE takes over from there. As a parent, when you find out your child has hearing loss, though, it is a very overwhelming experience. And before I did this work, I worked on legislation to get insurance coverage for children's hearing aids with my friend Sarah Kogan. We were moms. We were not lobbyists. We just learned the system. It took us 6 years. And that was really fostered by what we were seeing going on within the parent community and actually experiencing ourselves. I actually got a stack of paperwork this high within a month of finding out my daughter was hard of hearing. And even though I'm hard of hearing myself, it was a very, very stressful time. So the reason I'm excited about this report is because it requires the Department of Public Health for the first time to work with the Department of Education to share data. And that sounds like it may not be very difficult, but we had 8 different siloed data receptacles basically to pull data from, and not only just to have numbers, but to tell a story and to make a measurable difference. We've had 3 annual reports, and this year's report was about the diagnostic dilemma. My child was diagnosed with hearing loss, so at least I, as a parent, was able to take the next step, as hard as that was. But most children in Georgia, we don't even know if they're deaf. And that's a problem. If you don't know a child is deaf till age 3 or 4, DOE is getting that child functionally without any language, and as you can imagine, literacy is almost impossible for those children at that point. One of the things we developed is a language and literacy dashboard. The report is like 68 pages long. We do have an executive summary, but this is really, I have a business background. So if you look at the bottom right first, this is what Department of Education is working on, is literacy for deaf children. Well, only 15% of deaf children who are in special ed right now are reading by grade level in 8th grade. And I know all of you are aware of the impact of literacy on, later adult outcomes, but it's a very serious issue. And I think that we all became a little bit overwhelmed, just as I was as a parent. How do you increase literacy with deaf children? We're not just talking about children who are hearing, we're talking about children who use all different types of communication modalities. So it further complicates the way we teach these children to read. So what we did is we dialed it back a bit. We looked at those key transactions that we knew these children had to hit, that Dr. Tucci talked about, and we started collecting data from these different databases to come up with a dashboard. So we did that in year 1, and then this year what we tried to do is it's not enough to report these data. We have to do something about it, but we can't do everything at once. So what this dashboard is telling us is where these babies are falling out, not what type of quality and timely services they're getting now, but who are we losing altogether? Right now in the state of Georgia, because it's state law, we have a very high percentage number of babies who are getting screened at birth. Even during the pandemic, the DPH issued a letter to every birthing hospital in the state saying that this was a critical and essential healthcare service, which was instrumental because we didn't really lose any ground over the past 2 years. The next step after a baby is screened at birth is for that baby to get a follow-up test. It's kind of confusing because diagnosis doesn't just mean that that baby is diagnosed with hearing loss. When the CDC reports diagnosis, that's merely did the child get the follow-up test to find out if they were deaf or not deaf. So when you look at the blue bars, you can see that basically only 22% of the children who referred from that initial newborn hearing screen, the screen said this child looks like they have some risk factors, only 22% of the children even got a follow-up test. So we're not looking at 22% of babies being diagnosed. We're just missing that other percent. We don't even know. Those kids are, out into the ether. And the problem with this is that the CDC goes to that next transaction point, early enrollment, using that denominator, that subset of children that made it to that diagnostic process. We don't even track children that aren't diagnosed. This is just to tell you a little bit about what the diagnostic availability is in the state, which is a key issue why we have such low diagnosis. This is showing you areas in Georgia where a family can even get this follow-up test. There's tons of hurdles, but just availability of services. If we don't have the services in the state, we can't obviously complete the testing. One of the things I did actually want to mention that's not in the presentation, in terms of what do we do about this, the governor has a GEAR, Governor's Emergency Education Relief 2 Fund. We have applied for this. Basically, the only way, if I go back, these are, for lack of better terms, brick and mortar operations. These are actually health clinics where you can go. Parents drive 2 to 3 hours for these tests. The real critical thing here is a baby must be asleep to do this test. You're driving from North Georgia to Atlanta. Any parent here knows the chance of that baby being completely still for that test is null, And so what happens here is a lot of these babies are sedated in order to complete this diagnostic test. And a lot of parents, they're not interested in doing that just to find out whether or not their child is deaf. They're approaching this from a wait and see method. So what we really wanted to think about is how we ramp up teleaudiology in the state. So with teleaudiology, you can have an audiologist at CHOA, and then you could have a tech in the field anywhere. You could do this out of a car or a van or a mobile audiology unit, which the Department of Education has. We've always been thinking that this is the only solution to increasing diagnostic care. But what I was going to mention is that there was the GEAR 2 grant, which we've applied for, to basically go back and help these COVID babies. So for the past 2 years, we've had these kids screened in the newborn hearing screening, and there was literally nowhere to go to get that follow-up test. These babies are 3 already. We don't know if they're deaf. So if we get this funding, it is to do a rapid expansion of teleaudiology through the entire state of Georgia, with the goal of having an actual unit that is equipped with a teleaudiologist in Atlanta and a tech in the field for everyone within 1 hour, everyone in the state of Georgia within 1 hour. So we're very hopeful that decision will be made mid-January. I think if we're able to get this, I think that the program will be a phenomenal success, and hopefully it will transform the way we diagnose babies in the state.
The only thing I will sort of add to that is without a diagnosis of deaf or hard of hearing, you are not eligible for any public or private services to address the hearing loss. So if you don't have a diagnosis, you cannot be served by Babies Can't Wait. If you do not have a diagnosis, you cannot be served by Georgia Pines. If you do not have a diagnosis and you go to school, you are not eligible for an ASL interpreter. You are not eligible for an FM system and the teacher wearing a body mic. Those are all dependent, those services are all dependent on having a medical diagnosis of being deaf or hard of hearing. So it strikes fear into our hearts knowing that less than 25% of our children are documented on an annual basis of actually having an on-time diagnosis. And even if children do end up getting a diagnosis, if you get a diagnosis after the age of 3 months, you are unlikely to ever achieve age-appropriate language, regardless of what that language is. So, again, if you do not get a diagnosis by the age of 3, that child is unlikely to ever develop age-appropriate language.
Say age of 3 or 3 months?
3 months, I'm sorry, 3 months. By the age of 3, if you do not have a diagnosis, you are unlikely, that child is unlikely to develop age-appropriate language. Because every next step is dependent on that diagnosis. So it just continues to delay each one of those transactions that we've identified. And so that's really why we've tried to focus our resources here in this first transaction where we're seeing this challenging point and looking at, if you go back, here's the brick and mortar availability for diagnostic centers in Georgia. And here's a heat map of where our DHH students live in Georgia. Now, this is based on identifying DHH students by their special education eligibility, their primary eligibility. So there are actually DHH children out there that we don't even know they exist. Because if you are a DHH kiddo and you are in general education without any special education services, we don't know you're there. We don't know you're a DHH child. So if you look at what's available versus where our kids are, we're not finding our students. We're not finding them early. We're not deploying resources early. And so when they show up to us at the age of 5, at the age of 7, literally alingual, it is almost impossible for us as educators to remediate that delay to get them to age-appropriate language and on-grade level reading. So what we are challenged with resolving when they get to us at the Department of Education has already, the foundation has already been determined in those early intervention years. Yes, sir.
In the obstetrics profession, are they communicating this? Because that 3-month window is a really short period of time.
So
I know the pediatric, medical care and obstetrics is a little bit different. So there's a bridge there. I mean, so how are the obstetrics professions?
There is a program called Talk With Me Baby that is supported by the Department of Public Health, and it has been implemented in birthing hospitals and birthing centers across Georgia. And one of the messages in that Talk With Me Baby program is having having those nurses that are working with women pre-birth and then after birth, they are delivering this message about how important language is. and to know what language your child needs and to know how your child can access language, we've got to do this follow-up test. We've got to do this diagnostic test. And so there is some messaging that is happening around this particular test through the Talk With Me Baby program. But I think there are still challenges there. There are so many things that a new parent is trying to maneuver and juggle, and you don't see the impact of deafness or being hard of hearing. You don't see that until a child is almost 3 years of age and they're not talking, right? So this is sort of a silent disability, if you will. It's hard to physically see what's happening because we're not expecting these children to use language until they're 2, 3, in any true comprehensive way. And so we are working with Talk With Me Baby, but we are also looking at how we can mobilize staff within birthing centers and birthing hospitals to sort of change this message around this diagnostic evaluation. Yes, sir.
So my home county is one of the gray ones, Emanuel County. There's about 25,000 people in Emanuel County. I find it hard to believe there's not one person. So there's probably someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, and they haven't been.
You are
They
absolutely,
haven't been exposed to resources. They don't know because their parents don't know.
yes, sir, you are absolutely correct. I do not believe that there are 0 DHH children in these gray counties. We literally, at this point in time, did not have data. We did not have a way to identify our students, and we did not have data that determined that there were children in these counties. But we know they're there. We know they're there. And they're not getting what they need, and their families aren't getting what they need. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about partnering with nurses, birthing nurses and stuff like that. What about pediatricians? I feel like when my son was born, for those first few months, you go to an appointment with a pediatrician every month, and I feel like his hearing was checked every time we went. Is that, and maybe I'm taking that for granted, is that not a consistent practice across pediatricians to check babies at month 1, month 2, month 3 to catch that gap? And are y'all working with pediatricians to kind of get this message across as well?
We are looking at ways to work with pediatricians. We work with the Georgia Pediatric Association, I believe, is the association we've been working with. Dr. Fozia Eskew, who leads that. She looks a lot at those early evaluations, those well baby visits, those types of things. There's a high rate of variability in the administration of the hearing screening test, and also there's a lot of variability in the messaging around that test. So most babies who fail their newborn hearing screening are actually not going to end up with a diagnosis of deaf or hard of hearing. There's fluid that can be in the ears after birth, and that can also often look like a hearing loss. And once that fluid has resolved, then the baby is retested and they end up having typical hearing. And that is true for probably 80 to 90% of babies. The problem with that is we do see some pediatricians who will sort of try to calm the parent and say, oh, it's probably fluid on the ears, it's not a big deal, we'll check back in 8 months. And for the children who really it is fluid on the ears, that's not the end of the world. But for our children who are deaf or hard of hearing, we've lost those 8 months. We've lost that early intervention time. We've lost that parent capacity building time. And so we are looking at medical professionals and the messaging that they are sharing with parents. It's a little more difficult to work within the private sector sometimes because we have less oversight, if you will, in terms of what we can do with the state. So we really are looking to bolster those partnerships within the medical community so that they can take the initiative and start to make the messaging the most effective that it can be for our parents who do have kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. Yes, ma'am.
Have you partnered with, or are you working with the Deal Center?
No, ma'am, I do not believe we are.
I will talk to you after that because Arian Walden is the vice
Oh,
chair.
yes, yes.
And we talk about, language nutrition.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
the time, and how to get to parents in the early stages in utero, as well as, when they go to the pediatrician, to get them on in the right area for any testing or whatever they need in order to get them on the track to being able to have language and literacy.
That would be wonderful. Language nutrition is one of those concepts that was birthed, if you will, in Talk With Me Baby. It's such an incredibly awesome message. It makes so much sense. Language makes your baby's brain grow. It's language nutrition. That would be wonderful. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Okay.
All right, so remember I said that we could only find students who are deaf and hard of hearing if they were enrolled in special ed with a primary eligibility of deaf and hard of hearing. That means if they're in special education and their DHH eligibility is secondary or tertiary, we cannot locate those students. That also means if they are on a 504 plan, we cannot locate those DHH students. And if they are in general education and they are DHH students, we cannot identify and locate those students. So what we have devised is a DHH-specific GTID process. I don't know if you're familiar with the GTID, Georgia Testing Identifier. It's kind of like a Georgia student's Social Security number. And so what we are now doing is at the time of diagnosis, that is a mandated report to the Department of Public Health for any child that's diagnosed between birth and 5 years of age. So at the time that diagnosis is reported to the Department of Public Health, they send a batch of children to the Department of Education, and they then give each one of those babies who's been diagnosed deaf or hard of hearing, they give them a GTID, but it's flagged as a DHH-specific GTID. That DHH-specific GTID now goes into the databases at DPH, and it also goes into the database at Georgia Pines. When those children transition from early intervention into DECAL, into a local education agency, or into a state school, if you will, we now know that GTID will follow them. We now know that that's a DHH kiddo regardless of their school placement, regardless of their special education eligibility. So now we can actually identify all of our DHH children, and we can look at, for the students who are doing really well, what was their early trajectory? What services did they get? Do we find a particular community that's doing a really great job? How do we replicate those successes across the state? Are we seeing a community that's really struggling to deploy resources? How do we then support them and get them the resources that they need? So this allows us to not only have a better identification process, but it allows us to identify those students who may be achieving, who may be in general education, and then we can sort of backtrack and see what their trajectory to that achievement was. 504 plan, there actually was legislation recently passed where now children on 504 plans will be identified by their eligibility category. So we'll also be able to find children who are deaf and hard of hearing if they are being served through a 504 plan. This does not solve the challenges around identifying children who, came from another state, children who may have missed that diagnostic process altogether, or children who have late onset hearing loss. So if their hearing loss showed up after the age of 5, this process is not going to capture those particular students. We are also working on biannual language assessments. We have currently trained a 10 assessor cohort, 8 deaf native users of ASL, and 2 bilingual bimodal ASL spoken English users have been trained to administer the only norm referenced on DHH children, the only standardized assessment that's norm referenced on DHH children. So if a parent, if a school system, if a child care center has a student or a child between the ages of 3 and 13, and they want us to come out and do an ASL assessment so we can look at that child's language development, they can contact me, they can contact our outreach program at the state schools, and we will send out an assessor to complete a language assessment, and we can do this biannually. We come to the student and it is free of charge. So we administer the assessment, it's brought back, it's double scored, and then a report is sent to the school and the family around things that they can do to support that child's language development. We're currently working on the ASL assessment. We will pick up spoken English assessments starting next year. And so we will have a way to start tracking our DHH student population's language development from 3 through, really this test can go up to the age of 13. And then if you have children who are 14 plus with additional disabilities, those more complex learners, we can also use this assessment on those children as well.
I'll add something at this point, and I'm sure our Teacher of the Year will appreciate this. So if you're a teacher and you're in 5th grade and you're trying to figure out where this deaf and hard of hearing students come from, as an effective teacher, what do? You go back and look at their file. You look at their growth in that. We have teachers, we've talked about in here recently, they may be the only deaf and hard of hearing teacher in that LEA. And so this will provide them a way to go back historically and see the growth of those students, in addition to what they've been talking about where people get alerted to certain things. So that's exciting if you're a deaf and hard of hearing teacher out there, of knowing that that will be available to you to look back historically.
I think it's also really helpful too in that if you have a child that is a striving reader, let's say they're a 5th grader and they're reading on a 2nd grade level, and you're trying to figure out what it is you're supposed to do to remediate this child's reading delay, if you're not taking language into consideration, then you're only addressing half of the need. So if the child's a 5th grader and they're reading on a 2nd grade level and their language is, let's say, at a 2nd grade level, then we can't expect them to read text at a 3rd grade level if their language is at a 2nd grade level. So if we use this language data and we look at that discrepancy between the child's language and the text we're asking them to read, if we see a discrepancy there, we know we have to address the reading skills, but we also have to address the language skills. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of our reading instruction, really for DHH children across the nation, is we're focusing on that reading instruction, but the language is the foundation for reading. So if we're not assessing the language and we're not directly intervening so that children are moving towards age-appropriate language, we're not going to achieve on-grade level literacy in the ways that we want.
Any questions from the board members? Y'all have been very patient. Thank you.
Yes.
Sure. Well,
I have another question about process. Again, maybe this is something I'm taking for granted. But at my school, and now of course COVID kind of put this on pause for a couple of years, but all of our students, I'm a K through 8 school.
Okay.
And all of our elementary students have a vision and hearing screening every year at our school. Is that something that's specific to my school, my district? I think it is my district, but is that something specific to my district that is not something that's required statewide? I don't.
So we are starting to do a, what would I call it?
Feasibility analysis.
We're doing a feasibility analysis looking, right now the state of Georgia does not mandate vision or hearing screenings after that initial Form 3300. So a school district has to make the decision if they have the staffing capacity and the financial capacity to provide these ongoing vision and hearing screenings throughout a child's, academic career. What we are seeing right now is that larger districts that are more, have access to more funding, more resources, more staff. Many of those larger districts are doing hearing and vision screening.
Not Savannah Chatham.
Okay, and I was in Cobb County, and we had our own audiology department. We had our own booth, right, and those types of things, right? So what we're finding is it's really honestly dependent on that LEA's access to resources and staffing. And so we are looking at the feasibility of a hearing and vision screening mandate. And that's about as far as we've gone thus far. We haven't made a lot of progress yet. COVID did put a block on some of that. We're also working with the Office of Whole Child here at DOE. They are also looking at hearing and vision screening, a hearing and vision screening mandate. And so we're kind of working together in collaboration to see what that would look like. And we've talked about, I don't know if you're familiar, MTSS, that sort of tiered service model. We're kind of looking at an MTSS tiered service model potentially for districts in Georgia. So if you're a smaller district, you might get more help from the state to do these hearing and vision screenings, where larger districts may be able to do it just completely within house. I don't know if you want to add.
No, I think you've got it all.
Okay.
And again, to your point though, looking at language as a part of determining a child's literacy issue, if we have decided to put a child into RTI,
Yes.
one of the first things that we do is screen
Right.
vision and hearing.
Right.
And again, is that something that's state mandated, or is that also something that's district required? Our district requires it,
I don't think the state requires a screening for RTI. I think the only requirement is a vision and hearing screening for eligibility for special ed. I do not think that RTI, moving within the tiers of RTI, do not require, from my understanding.
Tier 2, once they go into tier 2, we screen them. We don't screen before tier 3, I mean, because we've already screened them.
Yep.
But, we rule that out as an issue.
Right.
Putting them into RTI, so.
And it's just really easy to confuse a vision access issue or a hearing access issue. It's very easy to confuse that with behavior, because children who aren't able to access instruction will often act out. And so then we're focusing on the behavior when really it's just, we need some hearing aids or some glasses, right? Or we need an ASL interpreter so that the child can access the instruction that's being shared in the classroom. So
this is an old thought, but remember when this teach my baby or
Talk to me.
Talk to me, baby.
Yes,
was
ma'am.
in, all right, and it's still in our hospitals and all, but there was a thought at that time that once they would do the hearing and screening there, then they would go back for checkup and do the hearing and screening, and then they would go to public health if they were red flagged. And so public health would help with that over the course, and that would probably be 6 months or a year. But something happened between that, because we're waiting for them to get in kindergarten now. And if your districts, like we do kindergarten and third grade screening, so they've still missed out. But wasn't there some conversation?
You're right. What happened with that, I mean, that's what we want to see happen. But again, we were dealing with 3 distinct agencies, DOE, DCAL, and DPH. And as you know, DPH is massive. And it really depends upon who the leader of that is. We've had people that this has been totally their passion, and they've given it their all, and that's how a lot of this we've gotten to where we are. But we were saying things about our data and how we cleaned up a lot here at the agency. DPH was way behind. They would get something, and it could be 90 days before the person would get it to put it in and things like that. It was just a significant delay. And under one commissioner, she was trying to make a huge dent in that. So it really depends on that. We see the issue. Where we see also that we get a lot of traction, we've talked about how do you really influence these pediatricians and others, depending upon the commissioner, sometimes when they'll send out some strongly worded letters of support to do it, that calls some of the pediatricians to pay attention a little bit more about the value of this, and then they encourage the parents come back even more. But I'll also say, and I'm glad that you said it, you can see totally how the mobile audiology program who came and presented to you, none of this is in isolation. And I can remember when Superintendent Woods came aboard, he met with us as division leaders, and he wanted these silos torn down here where you talk. And so when we mentioned a number of these, it goes well beyond this. It's the special ed division, it's the accountability division, it's the policy division. And so all of us are working in tandem, and I think some of y'all might have been in budget and some of the great stuff that's going to be coming. And you can see that lots of folks are working in tandem in that too. And that's what's going to move us forward. We can't just work separately anymore. And you can just imagine what kind of heavy lift this was to get all these agencies together, to get a law in place that gave us teeth. The old antiquated Deaf Bill of Rights, we had one in Georgia, and it listed out all these great things that you should be doing for deaf and hard of hearing children. And if they did them, it would have made a dent in this. But then you flip it over, and the very last thing it said that if you're a local school system and you don't have the financial means to do any of these, you don't have to. And it sort of totally negated all the other stuff. This law does not do that. It doesn't back down. It holds people accountable, and so we appreciate it. But your point is well taken, Helen. It's putting all these pieces together still, to be honest.
So we're lucky in Gainesville where, Jane Eve Wilhite 50 years, 70 years ago started the Hearing and Audiology Center in Gainesville, and Eve, her daughter, went on to be a therapist and do great things and, all that kind of stuff. But, my concern, and I hear your passion here, and I think that probably this presentation was designed because we're professionals, but I can understand why a pediatrician would say, if 90% of the time it's not hearing loss, not to alarm a parent and say, hey, let's check it again in a month. I don't think that's bad medicine. So it sort of sounded like you were saying, oh, the pediatricians just won't do what's right, when it's not bad medicine to not alarm a parent. And it does sound like once you get this diagnosis, you've got to go right into some database at DPH, and then it starts these things. You're using terms like deployment of services. And I can see where parents would, even though they want the best for their child, that they would feel overwhelmed and just say, I can't do this right now. I need some time. And I think, and I'm sure that's just because you were presenting to us, okay, I get that probably when you're presenting to a parent, you're not, but I can remember those times when I have 4 children, and I have a grandson that has ITP and who has had to go through lots of really horrible treatments as a result of that. And it's very difficult when you're facing a problem like that to kind of feel like, oh, and now you gotta do this, and now you gotta do this, and now you gotta do this, although you want to do all those things. So that's just.
And I think that's a great point too, and they can attest to this work that when we all came together years ago to try to start focusing on this and where to start with it, I think Kelly said it well. You as a parent, suddenly you got all this stuff coming, all this paperwork, and not only that, they're calling you from DPH, Georgia Pines, all these other places, and you don't know who to go to about what. And we made a commitment as a group that we literally took a lot of those materials, especially in Georgia Pines, that might have not been parent friendly about how you go in and talk to them. And so that really has been on our radar, and you're right, we did it this way for y'all.
I know, thank you.
But for the parents, that language, fortunately, and it took a while for us to get there, we've made a lot of gains in doing that. You could probably attest.
Well, you guys couldn't see me, but I was like nodding. It's why I do this work. With children, I've heard from some teachers that testified for us with the bill I was working on. She's getting kids at 5 with no language, no ASL, no spoken language, literally in front of a television for 5 years. And she walks into her classroom and she's a DHH teacher. Somehow that child was diagnosed, nothing. Basically as a parent who, was reasonably educated, I got all this information, was hard of hearing myself, lived 5 minutes from the Atlanta Speech School, which teaches deaf children how to listen and speak. It was traumatic. Just to be completely transparent, It's emotional when it's your kid. And it was emotional for my husband. I'm like, well, she's just gonna be like me. And he's like, I've seen you struggle. He said, I've seen you cover it up. I've seen you, it's a silent thing. So, to your point, I keep these wonderful professionals in check because, it's something that has to be relevant to the child and the parent, and it has to be individualized. Not every deaf child is not the same.
It might take a parent a few months to kind of get their head around it. It's just, and it doesn't make that parent any less, wanting their child to do great. It's a lot. It's a lot because everybody wants a perfect baby, and every baby is a perfect baby, regardless of what's wrong. You just got to sometimes get your head around it.
But I think you have identified a challenge that we face with pediatricians in that the messaging is nuanced. It's individualized for every family. We
the
even
practice
have-
of medicine.
We have some people who say, your baby has failed the newborn hearing screening because they've determined that that parent needs that word failed as an impetus for urgent action. But we have other people who will sort of work with that family and they'll say, okay, we can use the word refer. Your baby is referring from the newborn hearing screening. It's nuanced. This term is good for this family, probably won't work very well for this family. And so you're right, most of the kids are not going to be deaf and hard of hearing. So why would we want to, scare a parent for something that very likely may not come to pass? It's a challenge. The messaging component is a challenge for sure.
Question. You showed the brick and mortar testing facilities, and we've seen the mobile audio lab and the testing that you have. I'm familiar with Lions Club that does tremendous vision screening. Is there similar organizations that are doing audio?
So there's one person that I want to really recognize for the work within the DHH community, and that's Chairman Penny Houston. She has done so much beyond the work we're talking about. One of those things was to work with the Public Service Commission to create a program with the Lions Lighthouse to deliver children's hearing aids, almost free of charge, but with a sliding co-payment too, so parents had some skin in the game. They have been doing this for about 3 or 4 years. We work really closely with Edwin Link, I think, who is the executive director there, and we're working on a lot of this. I just want to stress this, nobody's losing these kids on purpose. They're losing these kids because we have a system that's disjointed. I mean, Dr. Moore talked about, DPH and data collection. That's because the birthing hospitals are responsible for reporting that information into DPH. Some of them don't even know there's a database that exists to do this. So because we have all these different pockets and silos, a lot of this is just happening because people don't know what they don't know. Same with pediatricians, so.
I'm a proud Lions member, so we're actually gonna partner with another county Lions club that has a mobile unit.
Yes.
They bought it, and then we're gonna partner with them to provide the service in Twin Cities.
That's phenomenal.
We haven't done it yet, we just partnered with them, and we're gonna split it up over like the Fridays in a month and screen the whole school.
Yep.
And then once we've screened everybody, we're hoping to do it every year at a certain, hopefully, the younger the better.
That's phenomenal. The rate of occurrence of hearing loss triples by the time a birth cohort ages up to 8 years of age. So without school hearing screenings, we are missing potentially 2/3 of the DHH student population by the 3rd grade. By the time these kids get to 8 years of age, the literal DHH rate of occurrence triples. And we don't have a way right now to systematically screen for those children who have late onset or progressive loss, or who may be coming from another state, those types of things. So we would be able to catch those kids if we had a more routine screening, both hearing and vision, routine screening practice across the state in our schools. Really would be wonderful.
Rotary Club is another organization that partners especially with hearing and hearing loss.
Yes.
I had the experience of going to CHOA with my goddaughter about 7 years ago because she had to do the hearing screening because they were concerned, her pediatrician was. And that is a difficult thing because when I took her in there, I had to make sure that she did not take any naps.
Yes.
Because she had to sleep during that. So every time she tried to nod off, I had to tickle her feet or something just to keep her awake the whole time. And that is stressful, and I took that on. I didn't realize how involved in everything it would be. But she came through the test, and they said that she did have some hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have just worked with her on as time goes on with everything. So, so I don't. When you tell a parent that they need to go in for these tests, that's very stressful.
It is.
And it takes a lot, and driving to a facility to have it done, you know, living in the rural areas that don't have access, that is very difficult. So the mobile audiology is that is just wonderful.
We are keeping our fingers crossed that grant is awarded. And we're more than happy to share any of the application information about that grant with the board should you like to look at it.
And as we're wrapping up, I didn't say this in the beginning, Kelly Jenkins, you can see she does the work with the commission, but she's under contract with us. It's not a lot of money, so obviously you can tell as a concerned parent, she donates a lot of her time. And you think of a force of nature that literally changes Georgia law so that things will be covered under health insurance where they weren't before, and these parents are not having to spend $3,000 to $6,000 on things. Game changer. But it's 6 years? Is that how long you said? 6 years, so a long time. And when we saw this really getting traction, that this law would pass and be in place, what we decided as an agency, I spoke with our chief of staff and he spoke with the superintendent and others here. I think the reason why we know what we know here and we can present it in this format is because perhaps as not as much like some of the other agencies that are partners with us in this, DCAL and DPH, they don't have people like these two that just wake up every day and this is what they are absolutely paid to focus on. And y'all saw Dr. Tucci when she came before, presented to you on foundations of literacy and those other programs. So she's wearing other hats too, but we just felt here as an agency, because I wasn't quite seeing the other agency say, hey, appoint this person and they're going to be in charge of it. And we made that call here as an investment, and I feel that's how we've gotten to some of these places. And obviously, there's still a lot more work to do, but I think you're as we move through these discussions over this year, I think you're getting more and more of a sense how we're not doing things in isolation. It's in parallel. And when we move down to our vision impairment side, because we focus on that's what we do too at state schools, you're going to see that same kind of in tandem support across the state. And just honestly, the vision impairment part, and that's why you may not hear us stand up here and talk about that, but you need to be aware of it. Those children score better on state assessments. They have auditory input. And if you can have that and your vision might not be good, or you got to have large print or something, that makes a big difference. And so when those folks come in the spring and talk to you, keep these things in mind, and that will explain to you why that population is doing better and what's happened with this population historically. But that said, we could not have even gotten this far without the support of our superintendents, chief of staff, and other divisions, and God knows y'all as board members. We just couldn't be here. And it does feel defeating sometimes, but when you've done this as long as we have, and you have the luxury of looking back, you really think we've come a long way in a very, very short amount of time. And that we appreciate that. So, yeah.
One last question. You hear about things like adult onset diabetes, for example, but with students, like if we get students screened at, let's say, that 0 to 3 month period, and they pass, is there hearing regression that occurs after that 3 month period?
There absolutely can be.
Yeah.
And that's why we see that tripling of the rate by 8 years of age. So when the 2021 birth cohort, if let's say we identify 10% of those kids we identify as deaf or hard of hearing, by the time that 2021 birth cohort gets to 2029 and they're 8 years of age, 30% of those children will have a detectable hearing loss. So that's why, that is a huge impetus for us in looking at the feasibility of mandated hearing and vision screenings for schools.
How much does it cost to have a hearing diagnostic center in an area? Do you know?
Oh my, that's in the grant. We are purchasing 4 regional equipment bundles that include every single piece of medical equipment that you need to actually provide a diagnostic evaluation. I think the bundles are less than $20,000 each. So we're not talking about, it's a portable machine. You can put it in a You can put it in a Honda Civic and you can drive it to where, I mean, this is not a big thing in terms of the medical equipment. And then you can actually do the evaluation in any location where you can be in a quiet room and hold the child. So Kelly has been making connections with the Georgia Public Library Association, as well as our work with DPH around public health clinics. We are targeting using public libraries and public health clinics as regional locations where we can do these diagnostic evaluations.
What about our RESAs? Those are regional.
They're not quiet though.
Well, you can have a place.
Well, and
We
some
have
of that,
certain
even with
rules
our
that-
mobile audiology,
Yeah.
you might have seen one of these board items. We actually have coastal plains.
Yeah.
They actually reciprocate and they give us funding to be able to send it down there. We probably would go anyway, but that's very nice of them because they don't have the resources. So I think if we slowly start building in those ways to have some funds come back in to replenish some things, that will be helpful. But really, even with this, Mayor, you said it so well that we're looking at rural places, those hot spots that you saw around there, and getting attention in those things. But Helen, you said that, so we got one. We'll focus on the other.
We really wanted to leverage libraries as well because there's that connection then to literacy and books and getting a library card. And we're also looking at ways to incentivize parents to potentially come in and do this evaluation. To your point, it is scary. And it isn't necessarily information you want, even if you need it. And so how do we make it less scary? How do we make it more palatable? So we want to incentivize parents with book baskets and book backpacks and things like that that are connected to literacy, but that also maybe just take the temperature down a notch and make it not feel like such a high stakes visit, that there's good positive stuff coming out of that visit, even if maybe the result isn't what you're looking for.
Sure.
I'm sorry, another question here, and I know that, counselors, for example, are very, very reticent, like, we'll call it on the ADD side, for example, to say this child has this going on. And I'm noticing the name Diagnostic, so there's a kind of a fine line between providing a diagnosis and a referral. So how do you walk that fine line?
Well, the schools would not be tasked with doing a diagnostic evaluation. They would only be tasked with a screening, which would then result in a referral to because you're right, schools cannot, unless you are a diagnostician within a school that's diagnosing a language delay or a speech delay, something like that. Schools generally have no business providing any type of medical diagnosis. So schools would only be responsible for screens, and then a referral might be a referral to a medical professional for a diagnostic would be the result of that screen.
That's the way it works at our school. So we'll screen, and then if a flag is raised, we do a referral to an audiologist, a professional audiologist.
Scott or Leonte, Kenneth, if you're still online, do you have any questions?
No, I'm here, but I don't have any questions. Great presentation. Thank you.
He wants to still be on the committee.
Do you still want to?
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be my honor if I don't get fired.
Awesome.
You're hired.
We know we took far more of your time than y'all had allotted us, but we really appreciate it. And again, we're going to start moving a little bit more into the early intervention part through Pines, and then start moving to wrap things up, talking with you about vision impairment. And then we'll end this year by reviewing how our students at all three schools have done on assessments and their growth and those types of things. So have a great afternoon. And again, it's good to see you all, and thank you for having us.
Actually, Dr. Moore, just a couple questions.
Yep.
I mean, we know that there's been a new appointment with regard to the interim control of schools. So if you could just kind of share.
Sure. Vanessa Robish.
And I think some board members might have some questions.
Certainly. Vanessa Robish, who was a leader of the school for 30 plus years, agreed to come back and serve as interim. I was there with her when I was the leader for 4, and just very knowledgeable person. And so that's what started the search firm, working with them that I'd mentioned earlier. But at that point too, I've made, I think, 3 trips to meet with the students that were there that had some concerns. And I'll meet with them again Friday, Vanessa and I will. And we'll walk through some of them again, as I told some of you on the phone. They're younger, and kids will sometimes ask for certain things. And we'll work through them with their concerns. Some of them are very interesting things that they proposed, and we are open-minded to listen to them. So we'll be wrapping that piece up. But Vanessa's very competent. Vanessa's willing to stay until the search process is finished, which again probably will be wrapping up in the spring. And it's a very tight process that this group is doing, that working with them. So I'll yield to any questions.
And I think one of those responses was increasing the size of the student council.
Yes. So when I was there, it was the second trip. What we have, there are lots of different groups in the school, organizations and things. And the way it really would work is you'd have some larger umbrellas where the leaders kind of come together and they debrief and things. But a very simple fix, when they said in the meeting, I turned to Vanessa and I said, add more students to the school council. And then they'll start hearing things about budget and those types of things and how things work and accountability and things like that. I think where some of those students, and I'm not sure how many in Georgia would know, is really how the school operates in tandem with all of us here. I can tell you as a teacher for a long time, my kids probably didn't know, where the central office was or what they actually did, those types of things. So I think this is an opportunity to explain to them. And at the last meeting with the students, the person that sat next to me, she is the president of the Georgia Association for the Deaf, just a lovely person. And so we are working with a lot of these groups to help us move forward at the school.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Were there any comments or demands that were laid out that we need to be aware of from the student group that you met with? I'd like to.
There were some personnel concerns, and I'll walk them through this last one. We don't talk about those things with children, but I will tell you, Lisa, after meeting with them, when you get down to concerns from some of them and you probe a little bit deeper, you could say it's hearsay. Okay, well, where did you hear it from? Well, it was a friend of a friend of a friend. Well, here's what we need you to do as leaders of the school. Come to us with examples or encourage those people to come see us. So it was topics like that. One of the things you may have seen is the kids now didn't want the oversight of the agency, but wanted the money to keep flowing. And so obviously they're not privy to all of our divisions here that are behind those schools to help them. So part of what I'll do is talk to them about what we do here as an agency and how we support them and how we are very fortunate to have this kind of support here. They asked for more deaf teachers and leaders, and I think they were surprised by my answer. Said, I do too. I want that. And so I said, but how do you do it? And I was telling the folks behind me that when I meet with them on Friday, because I know these students' transitions plans. I've read them. And so when I have them in the room, I'm going to talk to them about, okay, we're hearing your concerns and we're being very transparent with you. How many of you all are going to be teachers or go into leadership? I know what that response is going to be. So I think it's going to be a learning opportunity where you might have seen some things in the press that sometimes if people like me, these others, we're not deaf, I'm hard of hearing, Kelly is, that if we're not there, what does that mean for those students? And I think it's an opportunity to teach them that, you do want to be respectful of their culture because they do have a very unique culture. But at the same time, you want to teach them the value of tearing down silos, allies. And, if you run all of the allies off, who's left there with you? Those types of things. And Vanessa did a great job in a conversation with them. She'd interviewed 4 teachers. And all 4 teachers, they could sign, but they were hearing. And then the kids pivoted, well, as long as they know deaf culture, right? They're kind of focusing on what's in their heart and is on their mind. And when you dealt with students long enough, what they've asked, it's not unreasonable for what a child would come up with, a student would come up with, but it's nothing that we can't work through with them together. That's it.
Good.
Okay. Any others?
Any other questions?
I just don't want, because when I read the New York Times and the U.S. World News and Report, I just don't want what is good for the students to be overshadowed by this cultural difference that they are talking about. Not necessarily hearing, but they're talking about having people of color. Color doesn't dictate what they need at that school. There may be people of different ethnicities that will fit into the culture and help to move the school along and help the students, but there may not be. Every culture is acceptable, and I like the fact that the organization that you have chosen to look for a leader is not looking at that. They're looking at the best possible person that will help the students in their educational goals at the school for their futures.
And also at the same time, not lowering our expectations of what we expect of a leader in Georgia.
Exactly.
And that may not happen sometimes at our sister schools in other states around the country. But I feel strongly that to do that would be going backwards, and we don't want that. We don't want to lower the bar for anything that we all do. But you're right. I think when I say opportunities with the students, I think that's a good one, Lisa, that we walk through that. I mentioned, if y'all aren't going to be teachers, who is going to be, and that, we're all getting older, that types of thing. But really it's a teachable moment for them of we get that. But what we're also worried about in these programs, because they are so unique, at that school, think about it. The teacher has to sign. That you learn that. If they're deaf, they probably have it, but people like me, you got to learn it. And then what we also expect of them is to have content knowledge and certification. And so there's a lot that these specific teachers get put on them. And we understand that's why sometimes they move on to other things and that sort of stuff. So I will tell you, when I was there on this past Friday, and you walk around and you're paying a little closer attention, kids are happy. They were engaged in the classrooms. The staff that I saw were too, equally so. The cafeteria, I walked in there and they had just gotten a 100% score on their food services report. So we were proud of them. So they eat very nutritious meals. So I think it has happened. We've got a plan to move forward with it. We've got stable leadership that's there. And I'm very optimistic, like you said, after working so closely with this search firm and them being flexible. And I'll tell you, the search firm isn't telling us how it has to be done. It's negotiable. And they give you ideas. Hey, y'all will make the video, or y'all can make the video and things like that. Or, okay, you don't want to change the minimum qualifications. Okay, well, when we work on the job announcement, we'll do that. And you can explain about Tier 2 leadership certification through the PSC. So they've been really pleasant to work with and very open-minded.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Moore. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Tucci. Thank you, Kelly, very much. Appreciate y'all being here today.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. So with that, we're adjourned for today, and we'll see y'all back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Do you think I need to get rid of this?